right, great to be here this afternoon. Thanks so much. So, as already said, today I'll be talking about Incident Response Playbook for Android and iOS. I know that a lot of folks here have pretty good playbooks for traditional computers and servers, but mobile is increasingly a part of our world, a part of our life. My background is, again, co-founder of NowSecure. Starting out, I was into programming and about 7 years ago got into mobile security when I started the company, co-founded it. I've written 2 books, one on iOS and one on Android, and there's a third book on mobile incident response. We're going to just open source that book, so it's sitting out on our website, and you can download the first 3 chapters now if you're interested. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenges that you'll face from a mobile IR perspective. And I'm going to spend an extra couple minutes on this slide because I think this really tees up the challenge in the interesting next couple of years that we're going to have. So first of all, as a mobile defender, nobody's on your side. And when I mean nobody, I mean Apple and Google, and I'll get into some details, FBI, Zero Diem, state-sponsored, script kiddies, everybody is basically is on this side and you're on the other side. And one of the key challenges that we end up seeing is that as Apple and Google make iOS and Android more secure, we actually are getting less and less data that we need as defenders to actually protect the device. So some of the earlier talks today are talking about looking at the file system and creating rules from the data that you can generate. You basically increasingly don't have access to that information on mobile phones. We can't get lists of installed apps anymore. It's very difficult to get netstat. You can't see a lot of the data files that exist. I didn't get to see Sarah's talk this morning. There's a lot of information sitting on the device that you might be able to see some of it in the UI, and you simply can't get your hands on that as an incident responder. And so the challenging part is that attackers can go jailbreak their device. They can go out there and use the emulator. And so they can begin to find flaws in the system. And when they find a flaw in the system and then they go implement it, you simply have no telemetry coming back. You don't know what's happening. And so the problem is actually getting worse. Attackers have a lot more information than you, and your information is decreasing every single day. So there's a lot of challenges out there with, I think, the whole ecosystem is kind of against you. And it becomes more and more difficult to respond to mobile events. So I'm not going to go through this slide in detail. If you download the deck, you can check it out. But there's a lot of different ways into mobile devices, baseband, browsers, system flaws, the networks, et cetera. And so we've kind of listed them off so folks can take a look at it. I think malware is a really, really tiny piece of it. It's out there. But there's a whole bunch of ways in for folks. And so as you talk about very little information and large attack surface, it's an increasingly challenging problem. Now, a few other properties of mobile. First of all, dual use, BYOD, was touched on at the very beginning. That makes it really hard for you guys to get your hands on a phone and go do the type of analysis you need to, because there's an interesting story. We had a company, a Fortune 500 company, contact us, and their CEO's phone had been compromised. And they set up this agreement. They asked us to hire 4 people to work over the weekend. And we said, okay, we're ramping up to go respond to this thing. We're like, we need you to send the phone, and we're going to image it. And the whole deal died. And the CEO said, I'm not going to send anybody my phone. Probably because he was surfing something and he didn't want us to find it. But the point is that this is no longer just a corporate phone or a corporate device you can go grab, and people are really, really sensitive about their devices. I always tell people you are what you Google, and the things that I've learned about people doing forensic cases. So, if it's a dual-use phone, it's become increasingly difficult to get your hands on that and respect people's privacy. Certainly, it's always connected through different types of networks. You can't get admin access, so you can't root the device in most instances. You can't pull out the data that you need. And there's a whole different set of tools which we'll go through that are required in order to analyze these devices. So, we're going to kind of go through building blocks here. Now, the first thing is you go out there and you look at all the negatives of, man, there's this huge challenge. It's increasingly growing. It's this juicy target for attackers. They have an asymmetric advantage. What can I do? And I think the right way to look at it is, well, what information can we currently extract from the devices? And so we have this principle, we call it the SCAN principle. And we think these are the 4 areas that drive risk into mobile devices that are also things that can be measured. And the 4 areas are system, configuration, apps, and networks. So if you're able to go through and query each one of those and get security telemetry about those 4 domains, you can actually begin to build a profile of a device. One of the things that we're recognizing in a lot of enterprises is folks are basically saying, yeah, we've got mobile devices, we've got BOID, got corporate owned, we've got some MDM in place, but they really don't know what's on their network. They don't know what countries their data is being sent to. They don't know what data is being leaked out. They don't know what apps installed and what app versions. And so if you have to get started somewhere, one of the greatest places is just to go out there and try to identify your assets, go through that scan principle, fill in the information. You can get some of it from an MDM. Some of it you have to build out apps. We have a free app in the App and Play Store that pulls out this information. But begin to collect that information. And in addition to really getting a current snapshot of where your enterprise sits and where your data is going and things of that sort, it provides that kind of crucial historical view. So if somebody comes to you and says, look, my phone's acting weird, you can go back and say, well, I've got a snapshot, 7 snapshots. I can see how your phone has changed over time. So the best place to start is really go out there, get an inventory of what's happening, and really following that scan principle and building out the profile of each of the devices. The tools for mobile are different, and so you're not going to be able to use a lot of the same tools that you use. There's a little bit of overlap. And we broke them down into 3 broad categories. First of all, the continual analysis side. So how can you collect data on a near real-time basis? What sort of acquisition tools exist so that you can obviously acquire information, and then the forensics analysis that you do after that. I link out to the book. There's actually an entire chapter on this, and we link to open source and free tools. So you can hit that link and kind of build it. In a half an hour talk, I'm not going to be able to go through each of those. But the key here is that you've got to have to adapt your strategy for the challenges that mobile presents. So, when we first started out back in 2009, we would do physical acquisitions of Android and iOS all day long. That's an option that rarely happens today. If there was a passcode, we could typically circumvent it. That rarely happens today. And so you have to go out there and basically say, within limiting number of options that we have, what can we do? Generally, we're looking at logical acquisitions on devices that you have access to or grabbing backups. And potentially doing some network analysis to see what's happening, what's communicating out. So your acquisition choices are becoming more limited. The good news is that since this isn't a law enforcement case where somebody maybe locked their phone and isn't working with you, generally you can talk to somebody and probably gain access to, let's say, a locked device. So what we're going to do today is just really kind of talk about a playbook for mobile incident response. And I'd say there's going to be 70% overlap with the traditional playbook. We're going to follow the 6 steps from SANS and whatnot. So, but really taking the experience that we've had responding to actual incidents and actual cases and saying, like, what have we learned? And the way that I'll do that is I'll walk you through an incident that I responded to because it actually happened to me just before RSA. And I'll walk you through like what happened and how did we go about it and kind of tell the story of that with my specific example. Now what's really interesting is that I was talking to the CIO of a major corporation about a month or 2 ago, and I asked him, first of all, are you seeing mobile incidents and mobile compromise? And he said, oh yeah, we see it from time to time. And this company had some really great intellectual property, and they were routinely targeted by China. And so they had active campaigns. They was going after their phishing. They were also going after computers. And he said that they knew that they were going after phones. And every time they would go after a phone, they would simply say, like, this phone's acting weird. Well, I'm just going to reset it, wipe it out, throw it away, get a new phone, and re-provision it. And they really missed the opportunity to go in there and try to understand what was happening. And the reason, he said, we have no idea how to do this. We just don't know what to do. I'd rather hit the reset button, clean up the mess, not even worry about what happened, and move on. And so my hope from this talk would be if you run into that incident wherever you work, you can say, guys, we got a playbook. Let's try to follow this process and at least learn something from this so that we can get better at responding. But that's a message that we see all too often, and I think that's something that's going to have to change as mobile continues to permeate every facet of our business and our personal lives. Now, when we think about the types of incidents, there's 8 types of incidents we think folks are going to encounter. We've kind of enumerated them out here for you to take a look at. We're only going to focus on one incident type today, which is user-reported, device acting weird or whatever. But I would encourage you guys to think through each of these types of incidents, figure out whether or not they're applicable for your organization, do some really basic threat modeling. Hey, how likely is this to happen? How easy is it? What would be the impact to us? And then go out there and focus on the incident types that are most likely to happen or have the highest impact, and build out a playbook, start there. And then just know that you've got some fallback mechanism to do for the ones that you're not fully prepared for yet. An example would be lost or stolen devices. That happens all the time. You guys already deal with that. The impact is probably pretty low. There's a few things that you can do. But malware popping up on the App Store that has your company's name in it, that's a real thing. That happens. It happened to Aetna. Jim Ross, the CISO there, he's got a great slide deck and talks about it at different conferences. Or simply, hey, my phone's acting weird. So I need some help, and people sending it over to you. Okay, so let's jump into the incident. So this is back on February 13th. I was sitting at my house. My wife and I had our iPhones, and we both kind of began experiencing this on our iPhones. And you guys have all seen this before, of course. It's a certificate that's not being recognized. I'm an informed end user, so the first thing I did was snapped a screenshot of it. My co-founder is less technical, so she just said, hey, this weird thing came up and I hit cancel, but I knew enough to say, like, something's not right here. So the built-in mail program basically said, can't identify this. The Gmail app, which I also had installed, just simply wouldn't sync. So as an end user, I didn't know anything was going on when I ran the Gmail app, but when I popped over to Mail, in some sense it's good because Mail told me something was going on, right? And in some sense, it's bad, because how many of our end users would click that continue button? So there ended up being a certificate on here, and I got all the details coming out from that IP address, from that server, that common name there. And I was connected to my local Wi-Fi network at my house, which was connected to Comcast cables. It was a business Comcast. And it was interesting because also there were some DNS servers that we didn't recognize. So I had an invalid cert, some weird DNS servers, and so over the course of a couple days, we began to dig into this incident. So when I think about how you identify an incident, I think of three primary avenues that you ought to be thinking about in mobile. First of all, what are some indicators of compromise that we might want to establish? If you have a baseline for how your device acts, what's normal, where it sends its data, how long it takes to drain its battery, and things of that sort, because you've been doing that auditing process and building that up, some of the indicators of compromise are going to be looking at anomalies that kind of stand out from that. So, we've all experienced this where your phone starts draining battery at an enormous rate. A lot of times that's an app that's gone crazy and isn't using GPS properly or whatever. But looking for those unusual patterns, but you have to establish a base. A second big area for enterprises is going to be app reputation monitoring. So if you let's say you work for Aetna or MasterCard, do you know what apps out on the App Store have your name in it? Are they your apps? Did somebody else put a new app in there? And do you know who's connecting to your transactional servers? So if you've got a set of IP addresses, what apps are connecting into you? And so getting into monitoring those app and play stores so that you can spot a mobile incidents where somebody's not authorized to use your brand, or they've potentially created a malicious app. And then the third category, and it's probably going to be one of the most common, is just simply user reported. Hey, my device is acting weird, help me out. And so you're going to have to go in there then and look at the device. If you don't have any historical data, it's going to be a really big challenge for you to come up with anything. It's literally looking for a needle and a needle stack. And we've done tons of those cases, and you typically walk away and say, well, I'm not really sure, we couldn't really find anything. So that's where that baseline is so critical. Now, assuming you're able to get your hands on the device, unlock it, the first thing you're going to want to do is, again, obviously contain this. So it is possible to do some of these things remotely. So if you've got users, you've got, let's say, a continual analysis tool on there that can kind of pull out that scan principle, pull out those security telemetry. You're going to go and pull that data down as soon as the user reports it. In an ideal world, you'll get physical access to the device, capture all of that baseline information, system, config, apps, and networks, and grab that final snapshot. If it's your first snapshot, so be it, right? It's the best you can do. Maybe you can compare that phone with other phones that you had in the organization to see if there's an anomaly. And then one of the key things you need to do is figure out, do I need to do some network analysis before I stick this thing into a Faraday bag or stick it into airplane mode? And in my particular case, we needed to understand what was the certificate, where was the traffic going, how often did it happen. So we opted to keep the device up and running while we did the analysis. Once you've either done the analysis or determined you don't need to do it, then you obviously want to isolate the device and then do the forensic acquisition. If you can get a full forensic acquisition, awesome. I think your chances of that are about 10% today, and it's probably going down to about 1%. So you're probably just going to have to grab a logical or a backup and have your data sitting there. Once you've contained that particular device, and you're going to then go in and do your analysis, all right? So if I have a baseline, what's changed? If my data is going to a foreign country that I haven't seen in the past, what's being sent there? What app is sending it? Why is it sending it? Where is the certificate? Where is the DNS server? So this is going to be typical analysis. But again, unlike a server or desktop or laptop, you're just going to have a lot less information. And so you're going to have to be able to kind of take that limited information and see if you can extrapolate that. In some instances, maybe in a lot, you're not going to be able to do that. And so you're going to want to try to record what the parameters were and the baseline of that device and probably say, we're just not sure, and choose basically how you're going to recover from it and wipe it out. And maybe it was nothing, and maybe the user just misunderstood. But if you do spot it, then you're going to want to figure out, all right, what is it? Can I identify who else has been impacted by that? Can I create some sort of signatures? You know, if it's a malware on the App Store, can I figure out what users are running it? Maybe you can go out there and the user agent is different when they connect in, things of that sort. And then you're going to obviously want to remove it from that device and wipe the device. Now that typically means you're going to re-provision. And I have a pretty high level of confidence that if you physically reset a device and get it back to restore it back to its kind of verified image from Apple or for Google, that you're in pretty good shape. If you're really concerned about it, you could go get a new device. I don't think that's generally necessary. But one of the amazing things about mobile phones is people walk them into our network. They have full access to our network. They can scan for Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and networks and et cetera. And so there's a really good opportunity if somebody did target you and did get on a phone that they could move laterally within your network, or certainly do a lot of kind of surveillance and whatnot. We did a talk at RSA a couple years ago about turning the mobile phone into a corporate espionage device. And so you want to be cognizant of the fact that they could potentially have moved laterally within your network because that phone is moving in and out of all these different places, and they have some sort of foothold on that system. And the other really big thing, and I think this is a challenge in mobile, is that because mobile devices combine our personal and our corporate information, and they leak out an enormous amount of data. It's really amazing when you look at 200 to 300 apps and the aggregate of what is on that device, that the chances of an effective social engineering attack using that information, I think, skyrocket. And so one of the things that you want to be on the lookout for after there's a compromise that's been identified is that how much information does the attacker now know, and could they go fake that email to the CFO or the CEO or to the help desk, et cetera. And so I would be extra cautious about it in that instance. And then the last thing you're going to do, of course, is debrief, right? So what happened, what went wrong, how do I need to update my policies and procedures, did we figure out a vector, an indicator of compromise, and potentially going out there and sharing that with other folks in the industry to inoculate against attacks in the future. Generally, static signatures don't work great on mobile. It's very easy to change these things. If you have some sort of agent running on the phone, it's running in a sandboxed environment. You can't see memory, you can't see all these other things. And so you certainly can look for it, but it's not terribly effective with a static signature. And what you really need to do is be focused on anomaly detection. And then ultimately try to start correlating the data and making it cross-referenceable. So I'll tell you what happened with my device and what ended up happening. So I was running a Comcast business router. We ended up finding out with a Shodan search and whatnot that there was a compromise for that particular firmware. When we first noticed the attack, I had gone down and ultimately rebooted that router and everything went away. So it was a non-persistent attack. And about 24 hours or so, they would re-find the IP address and re-pop the router. They would put in their own DNS server. That DNS server was based out in Germany, and then it redirected traffic to another country. I don't remember right now. And at first it was a little concerning because we knew something was very, very wrong, and it was like, hey, are we being targeted? And the end that we came to, the end analysis, was we weren't being targeted. We were just part of a big net that had been cast out there, and it was attacking these different routers. And so the phones would grab the new IP addresses, the new certificates would be presented, and they were just trying to get as much information as they could from anybody. So in the end, we ultimately isolated it down to the network connection. It wasn't specific to the device. We got rid of that router and swapped in a newer one. But those are the kinds of things that you have to take those user-reported issues. You have to, dig down into the details. And it's really challenging if you think about, could you get one of your employees to capture the right information to then work with you at their home router to figure out that it wasn't your device or it was your device, et cetera. And it's a really challenging thing because mobile's so distributed. So I think it's going to be a couple interesting years for mobile incident response. Today, the tools aren't really out there. I started hacking together a tool that would allow you to quickly triage iOS devices and then ultimately Android devices. And so I think what you're going to see is that a lot of the folks that have been building tools for digital forensics are going to find that mobile is interesting. It's where we've been for about 7 years, and it's a really fascinating space. And you'll start to see tools start to get built. You're going to have less and less data. It's more and more challenging to do these investigations, but it's become a real reality for all enterprises. So we might be out of time, but...
no, you got time.
Okay, so we're good on time.
Sure.
Anybody have any questions?
Okay, I'll actually go ahead and kick it off here as we move a mic over to this gentleman here. What do you think about the iOS source code to the kernel being released unobfuscated?
Right, so I know that Apple responded and said that it was intentional, and they have a pretty tight ship there that they run. It certainly didn't feel terribly intentional, but I think it's probably a good thing for the industry. Apple patches about 100 vulnerabilities per iOS release. You can go out there and read their security page. So today, all of us feel like, great, I'm on a phone that the FBI can't break into and everything's good. If you look at the release notes for, I think it was 9.3.2, there's about 100, I think, security flaws, and 10 of them had a CVSS score of over 9, and all of those were kernel level. So in the end, I think it's a really good thing because I think it's a closed ecosystem, and you need more eyeballs on what's happening. And certainly Apple has a lot of problems, whether it's the go-to fail through all of the different things that you can see out there in the CVE's databases.
Thanks.
Do you have any recommendations for good mobile security packages that you could load on your phone?
So I'm biased on that, so I'll preface that, yes. So we've built an app. It's a very challenging thing to do. It's called NowSecure Protect, and it tries to take those 4 domains and collect information about the health of an endpoint. And so there's 2 things that you need to do to protect, to operate with confidence in mobile. You need to have a secure app running on a healthy endpoint. If your app withstands a Wi-Fi attack and withstands a forensics attack because you don't store anything sensitive, and then you're operating on a device that's not jailbroken, that is on a good Wi-Fi network, et cetera, you can operate with confidence. In fact, I'm going to argue you're going to operate with more confidence than you would on a Windows box. But you need those 2 key pieces of information. So get a secure app and make sure it's got a healthy endpoint. And our belief is you measure that scan principle, those 4 domains. There's probably other tools out there, but tools that backhaul your traffic, burn your battery, invade your privacy, ultimately those will fail because mobile is going to resist that. It defies that. Yes, sir.
Is there a universe in which you'd recommend that an enterprise, if they provide phones, would have, you'd recommend that they would have some type of jailbreak on them to do analysis, or does that just make them, much more or much less secure that it totally is ineffective?
Yeah, I don't see that ever happening. Yeah, so part of me as a security researcher, sure, I love it. And I think that in the hands of the right person, a jailbroken or probably a rooted Android phone would be the route that I would go, can provide a much higher level of security. It doesn't scale. Administrators at large enterprises don't understand it. Users could potentially make mistakes and open up things. And so I think that the core security of both platforms is increasing. I think that Apple's outpacing Android. So I think you have 2 choices. It's an iPhone or an Android phone running, Google's version of that gets the monthly patches. But I suspect that jailbreaking is not tenable at scale, and I don't see enterprises going there.
Would there, I have no idea, but I would imagine there's some kind of legal repercussion, for an enterprise to actively try and jailbreak or root an iPhone at least, because I'd imagine they're protected somewhat.
So Apple is going to fight them on that, and we have some customers who don't want us to test their mobile apps on a jailbroken iPhone because they believe it violates Apple's EULA. So I would say absolutely that's a challenge. And I think the bigger thing that's at play here is that because these are dual-use devices and people are increasingly aware of their privacy and how, where was I last night at 2 a.m., does my company need to know that? And actually, more importantly, from the enterprise's side, it's a liability for them to know where you were last night. It now becomes a subpoenable event. And so what we're finding is the largest enterprises are coming to us and saying, you know what? Give me a score on how healthy the endpoint is, and I don't want any other data about it. And so I think that's really the trend that we're going to see in the industry.
And so, hey, before we close, I know that the Crusades were fought over less, but from an incident response standpoint, if I'm rolling out devices today, Apple, Android, what do you think?
I think your two choices are Apple with the latest iOS or a Nexus device with the monthly patch updates.
Okay. There you have it, folks.
Okay.
Andrew Hoog, thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Give it up, folks.
Thank you.